Hey everybody, Casey Elmer with AcuEdge, and today we're going to be talking about how to take your shears apart, what to do, how to clean them, put them back together, so that way you can properly maintain your shears. They can last longer, your edge will last longer, and you won't have to spend as much money, because a lot of times we actually just stop into the client's booth and take them apart right then and there, clean them out, and put them back together, tension them, and they're all set. So today, these are just some generic no-name brand shears that are loan repairs that if a client of ours doesn't have a spare, we give these to them so that way they can stay productive and we can sharpen their shears, so that way they don't need to do them anymore. They don't have to live with a dull pair of shears. So with this one here, you can see it has a special little nut, which you use this special UFO tool to loosen it up. A lot of times there's a thumb screw one that you can just loosen up and it takes them all apart, but this way it's a little you need a special tool for it, and they just make this. You can buy it on Amazon, and right now we're working on actually producing these, so stay tuned. A lot of times when I'm taking a shear apart, I like to do it over a little container. This is just the top of a Dixie cup, coffee cup. That way, if any parts come out, when they hit the tabletop or wherever, they don't go bouncing off, going on the floor, and I have to search for them. So basically, all you do is loosen it up, and you turn it one or two times, and a lot of times you can actually just unscrew it with your fingers. So there's a special little nut that's got little tabs on the bottom of it, so that way it's a lock nut essentially. And then when you have your shears apart, what you want to do is keep your finger on the bolt itself, so that way it doesn't just drop out. And we can pick it up and take all the parts and pieces out one at a time, so we know how they come out and we can put them back in easier. So what you want to do is you want to lift up one blade just like this. Lift them straight up, don't bring them back and forth. That way you're not taking the cutting edges and running them together so it dulls them. And inside this one is actually a little lock washer, so that your nut will not back off. So you just want to dump that out, and if you just tap on it, and sometimes they don't want to come out, so we're going to show you how to get that out. So now what you want to do is whenever you're laying these shears down, you want to flip them up, so that way the inside ride of the shear is facing up, and that way if this is on the ground, on the table, and we end up pushing it around, if there's anything on the table, it can mess up that edge. So just put them so that the inside is up, and we don't have to we don't end up making them duller by taking them apart. So now you want to flip it over, and there is a little bolt in here, but on this little bolt there's actually either 1, 2, or 3 washers that are inside of these. Nylon washers are meant to wear out as you use the shears, so that way it's not metal on metal. So you want to make sure that those guys come out. If they are stuck, what you can do is let's just drop them all off. And what you're going to end up doing, we'll put this back in here and I'll show you how to take it out. So now you take your little screw and you're going to hold it, use the screw and just pull it right out of there, and that way you can get a piece of, you can get whatever's inside your shear out. And we're going to do the same thing with this little washer, and this little washer here is actually educated, because he has little tabs that hold on to these little tabs on the nut and prevent it from backing out. So we want to make sure that we put him back not upside down, the right way. So now that you have your shears, what you want to do is grab a little piece of paper towel, and the pivot point right here is the most important. A lot of times when your shears are together, you cannot clean this out. So the whole reason why we're doing this is so that way we can make sure that there's no, you end up making a sawdust of hair, and it gets in there, and now it's going to affect the tension and affect how well they move together. All you do is wipe off the inside, make sure that your cutting edge is away from you when you're doing it, that way you're not cutting yourself and whatnot. So we're going to do it with the other blade as well, and that is basically that. So now we just do the whole entire thing reverse, and a lot of times one blade will have a a square hole, and one blade will have a round hole, and we want to start with the round hole one first. A lot of times, because the screw and the washers go in that one first, we put the bolt in it and then we can assemble it. So you want to make sure that all of your little washers, sometimes if you lick your fingers they'll pick it right up, little washers are actually cone shaped, and that way we want to make sure that the cone, the smaller portion of the cone, if you were to imagine the continuation, is going down into here, so that way everything seats properly. Take your bolt, put it through. Once your bolt's inside, just put your finger on it and flip it over. And so I like to position it so that way this educated part on this screw actually has a little square on it, and I like to make it so that it's 90 degrees open to the opening. So when I'm putting my blade back on, I know about where it's going to be. So now we have our little washer here, and we're going to make sure that those little tabs right, if I can see, those little tabs right there, we want to make sure those tabs are up. So now you take your little nut, put it on, try and get it hand tightened first. It should spin with no problem at all. If it's not spinning, it means it's cross threaded, and back it off and redo it. You don't want to cross thread that because it will strip this nut or strip this screw, and we'll have to buy a new one. We don't want to have to do that. So now what you want to do is wiggle each of the blades to make sure all those washers and everything get seated right in there. And one thing that I recommend you do, if you have if you have a burr on your shear, and basically where you're going to see if there's a problem, if I can get it just right. Basically there's a little line right here, and that's your cutting edge. And so what we're going to do is we want to inspect that cutting edge, and you can see that there's a little wear here and there's a little bit right in here. But one shear that you can really tell if there's something on it is your thinning shear, and you can see all these little tiny nicks. That's what happens when the comb meets the other blade. And so you're going to be looking for all these little tiny nicks on your blade, and this is a given when you have a thinning shear. It's the nature of the beast, kind of. So what you want to do is when you have all these guys, when you're tearing your scissors apart, just check the ride and see how that cutting edge is. If there's a spot where there's no light, if there's no light being reflected from it, that means that there's a nick there, and we want to make sure that the nicks don't get any worse. And you can see this guy is good. So now if you do have a nick, what you want to do is if your scissor is catching on it, or if your shear is pushing hair right around there, then you're going to want to have them sharpened. Because we pull them apart, tension them, and they're still pushing hair, that means that the cutting edge is actually a little dull. So what you want to do is after you put them all together, you tighten it up. We're going to do the tensioning test, and we want to make sure that these shears are tensioned properly. So if you have a little, the shears will come a little bit of lube, and we're just going to put a little lubricant on there. I just have this is just a regular 3-in-1 oil. It's a pretty thin oil that just gives a little bit of lubrication so that those two blades, they glide past each other and wipe all the excess off. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to hold one of your blades, and then you do the drop test, and you end up trying just to drop, and make sure that what you're looking for is for the shears to actually close right about here. I'm really close with this one, and so what I'm going to have to do is probably just tighten it up just a little tiny bit. One click might be too much. And you just make sure everything's seated in there, just wiggle them just a little bit, and then do the drop test again. And you can see now I'm a little bit closer to the throat. It's actually perfect. And so if a shear is too tight, we're going to take this one right here, and we're going to tighten him up a little bit too much. And so now you take the heavier blade, and that's the one that you use on the test. And so this guy, you can see he just moves. And now if he's a little too tight, he won't drop at all. And so now, very, very little movement. That means it's too tight. And so if you have a shear that is too loose, what will end up happening is it will slam shut. And you can see it just slam shut and it actually bounces back open. So that's really loose. So now you know what to kind of look for. What you're trying to do when you're tensioning your shear is to have it so that when you're doing your drop test, it closes right about the center, about the middle of your cutting edge. And you can see this guy, as they warm up, when temperatures change, you'll end up getting a different amount of closure. So that's basically taking your shears apart and cleaning them.